So the left is coming out and trying to develop two new narratives in order to try and attack Trump and the Republicans. And these narratives are false on so many levels. So, for instance, Hillary Clinton comes out with a tweet in response to the U.S. now leads the world in confirmed coronavirus cases. And she tweets out, well, he did promise America first. Okay, there's a few things here. This is the problem that we have with coronavirus in all cases, is the fact that they just throw out numbers without any context to it whatsoever. So to provide you some context, one, the United States has the third largest population in the world, with China and India being the only countries with larger population. So when we talk about having the most confirmed cases, you could have, places like, Britain, France, Italy. You could test them and they could have 100% population infected, and they would still have less coronavirus cases on a totality of numbers than the United States because they just have less population. And out of the countries, US, China, and India, the United States is the only one really doing testing and aggressively testing during this time. China is not really doing any testing because they're more interested in pushing out propaganda. They've been trying to cover up everything since the beginning. You can't trust a single thing coming out of China. So they're not really doing any testing. In India, they're not really doing a whole lot in testing either, at least not nearly on the scale of the United States. So when it comes down to it, of course, if you do more testing and you have a larger population, then yes, you're going to have more confirmed cases. But if you were to do an apples to apples comparison, which would be a per capita per 1,000 people, you would find out that the United States is actually not the world leader when it comes to coronavirus as in terms of percentage of the population. So the left, is always trying to find a way to manipulate numbers, manipulate facts in order to twist them into a political narrative that, when analyzed, do not actually make a whole lot of sense. Now, the left is also coming through and trying to come out with another line of attack, such as this. As reported in the New York Times opinion section, the religious right's hostility to science is crippling our coronavirus response. Hostility to science? What hostility to science? It's the right wing that actually pushes science. The left wing, I got a newsflash for you Democrats out there. Just because you yell science after every dumb butt opinion you have doesn't actually make it science. And just because you declare it indisputable doesn't actually make it indisputable. Science is the pursuit of knowledge and truth, something that Democrats have no interest in, and that Republicans push over and over again. But just like the Democrats did with the term refugee, is that they redefined what science is in order to, benefit their political narratives. Heck, the Democrats don't even follow the scientific process. When we go out and we take a look at things like climate change, right? What is the scientific process? Well, you first make an observation, you make a hypothesis, and you gather a little bit of data, right? Or you gather the data. But that's where the Democrats stop. They always forget the next steps, which involves testing the data to see if the results are what you would predict, whether or not the information that you gather leads to the results that you would predict. If not, you got to go back to the drawing board. But the Democrats, they don't do that. They just go through, make an observation. Oh, things feel a little different. Oh, yeah, there's some fluctuation in temperatures. Here's what my opinion is. And then they stop. They never test it. And hearing how the Democrats are never testing the data and how they're all trying to browbeat everybody, science. And yet they deny science all the time. This is another interesting thing about the Democrats. They always go off and try to claim that, everybody else is a science denier. They try to claim the right wing is the science denier. And yet here the Democrats are denying science all the time, especially when it comes to biological science, right? Remember, they're saying that, you can actually be born a man and become a woman and voila, that's science. That's not science. Science states that your gender is determined by your chromosomes, which is determined at the moment of conception and never, ever changes, no matter how much surgery you have to artificially alter your appearance. Right? We got biological science, and the left denies science all the time while claiming they're the ones of science. They attack the scientific method and then act like they're the only ones pursuing knowledge through science. I mean, the left never ends with this, right? But then again, I decided, you know what? Maybe I'll try and play devil's advocate with this, right? Try and play devil's advocate to see if I can figure out how the religious right could be responsible for the coronavirus. All right, so let's see here. The coronavirus broke out in China. Well, not really a whole lot of, conservatives and not really a whole lot in the way of Christians there. We take a look at, globally, let's see here, Germany, not really much of a Christian population there, especially not evangelicals. Italy, not so much evangelical Christians there. Okay, let's try bringing it into the United States. Let's see here, the state of Washington. No, that they're more secular. California, no, they are very secular. New York, no. Boy, you know, the coronavirus seems to be hitting left-leaning cities and Democrats and pretty much leaving the religious right areas alone. So I'm still trying to figure out a way in order to try and, justify the New York Times saying that this is the fault of the religious right. So I turned to the Bible, right? And wouldn't you know it, I found it. I found the answer of how this is the fault of the religious right. Because look at this. What do these things have in common? The coronavirus, the Hebrews back in Egypt, 5,000 years ago, and how Moses came and brought the 7 plagues in order to get their freedom. All the smiting that, the God of Abraham, the Christian God did to throughout the desert, for 40 years of those who turned against the faith, and all those that went off and conquered Israel, and then Israel was liberated and all that. I figured it out. Every time, a hostile force, an authoritarian force that wants to trample over everyone's rights, oppress the people, and beat them into submission with thought control, some Christian goes out there and prays to God, and sooner or later, he eventually listens and comes with a smiting. There you go. If we take a look at the left, they're authoritarians, iron-fisted government, demand that you follow thought control measures where you're not allowed to have any difference of opinion, and you definitely shouldn't have any individual liberties. Some Christian out there, or some group of Christians out there, prayed to God, like what has been done throughout history, for protection against the rising violent authoritarian left, and God finally decided, okay, they're getting out of control, I'll step in. So yes, it is Christians' fault. It is the fault of the religious right, because we prayed for salvation and deliverance from the rising authoritarian and violence of the left, and God responded. There you go. I finally figured out a way to make the New York Times opinion article of how this is the right's fault make sense. Playing devil's advocate, I finally found a way to make something in the New York Times true, right? Because the New York Times, is not the paper of record, right? They're not, the standard of journalistic integrity. They're an over-glorified gossip rag. They're right up there with aliens impregnated me, just about, right? So anyways, if you want to be able to make sure that you never miss a video, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friends, your family, and just anybody that you think would enjoy this content. And if you want to get full episodes of the audio podcast, right, go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast from. Look for The Jacob Johnston Show. You can see, what the cover art looks like down here in the corner. And then subscribe and share that with your friends and family as well. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'll be back again soon.